Elvis Presley left behind a legacy full of music, but one song mysteriously disappeared after his passing. Fans never heard it, and no one knew why. Decades later, one of his backup singers finally explains the truth behind the silence. What was in the song that made it too sensitive to release, even after Elvis was gone? The song that vanished. Elvis Presley was known to the world as larger than life, but the people who worked closest to him knew a quieter side. He was generous, polite, and deeply emotional. He cared about how others felt, sometimes more than how he felt himself. Even when he became famous beyond imagination, he still listened carefully and thanked people often and treated those around him with respect. He laughed easily, but he also carried heavy thoughts that he rarely shared out loud. As the years passed, Elvis became a man full of memory. He remembered where he came from. He remembered the songs that shaped him. Music was never just sound to him. It was how he spoke when words failed. Every song he recorded carried a piece of his heart, whether the audience noticed it or not. When Elvis died in August 1977, the world stood still. Radios played his voice day and night. Old records were pulled from shelves and played again. People cried for a man they felt they knew, even if they had never met him. His songs filled rooms, cars, and quiet moments. It felt like his voice would never fade. But something strange happened in the middle of all that music. One song did not return. It was not played on the radio. It was not mentioned in tribute programs. It did not appear when people spoke about his final recordings. While his other songs lived on, this one slipped into silence. There was no announcement, no explanation. It simply stopped existing in the public space. At first, few noticed. Elvis had recorded many songs over his lifetime. One missing track did not seem important. But among those who worked with him, among those who stood near him in studios and on stages, the silence was loud. This was not an unfinished song. It had been recorded. It had been heard. It was real. Elvis had recorded this song late in his life, during a time when his voice had grown deeper and more serious. His singing was slower then, more careful. He did not rush through lyrics anymore. He let them sit. He let them breathe. Those who listened closely could hear that he was no longer singing only to entertain. He was singing to express something real. After his passing, people expected everything he had left behind to be shared. That was how it had always worked. When artists passed away, their remaining work often came out as a way to honor them. Fans waited for these final gifts, hoping to feel closer to the person they had lost. But this song never came. There were no official statements, no public reasons. It was as if an invisible hand had gently pushed it aside and closed the door. For years, the song existed only in memory. Not the memory of fans, but the memory of those who had been there. People who remembered the room, the mood, the sound of Elvis's voice when he sang it. They remembered how different it felt from his other songs. What made it even more unusual was that no one argued about it in public. No legal fights, no loud disagreements, just quiet agreement that the song would stay hidden. To outsiders, there was nothing to question. Elvis's legacy was still strong. His image remained polished and powerful. The story of Elvis Presley stayed simple and familiar. A gifted singer, a global star, a legend. But legends are made by choices, and sometimes those choices involve silence. Behind the scenes, the missing song became something unspoken but understood. It was not forgotten. It was avoided. People acted as if mentioning it might disturb something delicate. Time moved on. New generations discovered Elvis through the songs that were allowed to live. They learned his story through carefully chosen moments. They heard joy, heartbreak, and romance in his music. But they never heard this one song. As the years turned into decades, the silence around it began to feel heavier. The people who knew the truth grew older. Some passed away. Others stayed quiet, believing that keeping the secret was a form of respect. Then, slowly, something changed. One voice from the background began to matter. Not a manager, not a family member, not a headline name, but someone who had stood behind Elvis on stage. Someone who had harmonized with him, watched him closely, and listened more than they spoke. A backup singer. This person had no power to decide what was released and what was hidden. But they had something just as important: memory, honesty, and time to reflect. As years passed, the backup singer began to feel that the silence no longer served its purpose. The song was not dangerous. It was not wrong. It was simply human. The question was no longer why the song disappeared. The real question became why the truth behind it had waited so long to be told. And so, after many years of quiet loyalty, the backup singer finally chose to explain what happened, not to shock the world, not to rewrite history, but to complete it. Because some songs do not disappear by accident. They are hidden because they reveal too much of the person behind the legend. And this was one of them. The voice behind the king. The backup singer was not someone the crowd came to see. They did not step into the spotlight or wait for applause. Their personality was quiet, steady, and observant. They were the kind of person who listened more than they spoke and remembered details others missed. While Elvis stood at the center of the stage, this singer stood just behind him, focused, prepared, and loyal. Being a backup singer for Elvis Presley meant living in two worlds at once. One world was loud and bright, filled with cheering crowds and flashing lights. The other world was calm and private, made up of rehearsals, long travels, and quiet moments before shows. In that quieter world, real connections were formed. The backup singer joined Elvis's circle through music, not fame. They were chosen because they could blend their voice perfectly with his. Their job was not to shine, but to support, to lift Elvis's voice higher without ever covering it. This required discipline, respect, and trust. Over time, that trust grew. Night after night, they stood close enough to see Elvis's expressions change during songs. They noticed when he was joyful and when he was tired. They could tell when a song meant more to him than usual. While the audience saw confidence and charm, the backup singer saw effort and emotion. Elvis was kind to his backup singers. He greeted them warmly, asked how they were doing, and thanked them after performances. He never treated them as less important. To him, everyone on stage mattered. Music was a shared experience, not a solo act. The backup singer learned early that Elvis carried deep feelings inside. He did not always talk about them, but they showed in his voice. During rehearsals, he sometimes closed his eyes while singing, as if he was somewhere else. In those moments, the room felt still. Being close to Elvis also meant seeing the weight he carried. Fame followed him everywhere, but peace did not. The backup singer noticed how Elvis changed over the years. His laughter became softer, his pauses became longer. His voice, though still powerful, sounded more thoughtful. Yet, Elvis remained professional. When it was time to sing, he gave everything he had. He respected the music and the people who made it with him. The backup singer understood their role clearly. They were not there to ask questions or challenge decisions. They were there to support Elvis and protect the harmony of the group. Speaking out was never part of the job. When the song that would later be hidden was recorded, the backup singer was present. They did not think of it as special at first. It was just another session, another day of work. But as Elvis began to sing, something felt different. The room was quieter than usual. Elvis did not joke or chat much. He focused on the lyrics with unusual care. The backup singer followed closely, listening for cues, ready to blend in. But they noticed that Elvis's voice carried a deeper emotion than before. This was not a performance meant to impress. It felt personal. The backup singer did their part, as they always did. They sang softly, carefully, allowing Elvis's voice to lead. When the recording ended, there was a brief silence. No one rushed to speak. It was not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. No one announced that the song would be treated differently. No one said it should be hidden, at least not then. After Elvis's passing, the backup singer watched as the world celebrated his life through music. They listened as familiar songs returned again and again. They waited for the one they remembered so clearly, but it never came. At first, the backup singer assumed there was a simple reason. Maybe the song was delayed, maybe it was forgotten. They did not ask questions. That was not their place. As time passed, the absence became harder to ignore. The backup singer realized the song had not been lost. It had been set aside. Still, they stayed silent. The backup singer believed that loyalty did not end with passing. Speaking out without permission felt wrong. Elvis had trusted them. Breaking that trust, even years later, felt heavy. They carried the memory quietly, not as a secret to protect themselves, but as something they believed belonged to Elvis. Years turned into decades. Life slowed down, reflection became easier. The backup singer began to see how history was being told and what parts were missing. Elvis was remembered as a legend, but not always as a man. The backup singer did not want to change how people loved Elvis. They wanted to add something true to the story. They knew that if anyone spoke, it had to be someone who had nothing to gain. someone who had been close but never powerful, someone whose voice had always blended into the background. That was when the backup singer understood their silence no longer served Elvis. The story of the song was not about controversy, it was about honesty. And after all these years, honesty felt like respect. The backup singer decided that it was finally time to explain what they witnessed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. Because sometimes, the people who stand behind the legend are the ones who remember the truth most clearly. The night the song was recorded. Elvis Presley walked into the recording room that day with a calm, serious presence. He was polite as always, greeting everyone with a soft smile and a nod. But those who knew him well could sense that his mind was somewhere deeper. He moved slowly, not from weakness, but from thought. This was a man who had lived many lives inside one lifetime. By this point in his career, Elvis was no longer chasing success. He had already reached heights no one else had reached before him. What mattered to him now was meaning. Music was still his language, but he used it differently. He listened more closely to the words. He paid attention to how each line felt, not just how it sounded. The backup singer noticed this change immediately. Elvis did not joke much that day. He did not rush through warm-ups. He stood quietly, reading the lyrics again and again, as if he wanted to be sure he understood every word before singing them out loud. The room itself was simple. No grand stage, no cheering crowd. Just musicians, singers, and recording equipment. This was where Elvis felt most real. Here, he did not have to perform a role. He only had to sing. When the music began, Elvis closed his eyes. His voice entered gently, steady and clear. It was still strong, but there was something else inside it now, something heavier. The backup singer followed him carefully, blending in softly, making sure not to pull attention away. As the song continued, the backup singer felt a quiet shift in the room. Elvis was not just singing words, he was living inside them. Each line carried emotion that felt close to the surface. It was not sadness alone, it was a reflection, the kind that comes from looking back at a long road. Elvis did not stop or restart. He sang through the song in one steady flow. There was no dramatic movement, no big gestures, just focus. When the final note faded, no one spoke right away. This was unusual. Normally, there would be quick feedback or light conversation. This time, there was silence. Not because something went wrong, but because everyone felt the weight of what had just been recorded. The backup singer understood then that this song was different. Not because it was better or worse than others, but because it felt personal. It did not sound like something meant for large crowds. It sounded like something meant to be heard quietly. Elvis opened his eyes and looked around the room. His expression was calm but thoughtful. He asked gently if the sound was right. Someone nodded. Another person said it was good. Elvis thanked them, as he always did. There was no discussion about releasing the song or holding it back, at least not out loud. The work was done. The recording was complete. The backup singer did not think much about the future of the song at that moment. Their role was to sing and support, not to decide. They packed up their things and moved on to the next task, trusting the process as they always had. But the feeling stayed. As days passed, the backup singer found themselves thinking about that recording, about how Elvis sounded, about the quiet mood in the room. It stood apart from other sessions in a way that was hard to explain. Elvis continued working, continued singing, and continued performing when he could. Life moved forward. But that song stayed in the backup singer's memory like a bookmark in a book. A moment you know matters, even if you do not yet know why. Then, not long after, Elvis was gone. The impact of his passing was heavy and sudden. The backup singer mourned not only a performer, but a man they had worked beside, a man who had treated them with respect, a man whose voice they would never hear in person again. In the weeks and months that followed, attention turned to his music. Songs were replayed, albums were revisited. His voice filled the air again. But the song from that quiet recording room did not return. At first, the backup singer assumed it would appear later. There were many reasons a song could be delayed. But as time went on, it became clear that this was not a delay. It was a decision. The backup singer thought back to that day in the studio, to the silence after the last note, to the feeling that everyone had shared but no one had named. The song had captured something true about Elvis at that stage of his life, not the performer the world expected, but the man who stood quietly before the microphone. That truth, the backup singer began to realize, might have been the reason the song was set aside. Not because it was wrong, not because it was unfinished, but because it showed Elvis as he was in that moment. Thoughtful, reflective, humans. And sometimes the truth is harder to handle than the legend. When silence became a decision. After Elvis Presley passed away, everything around him moved very fast. There was grief, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. People who had worked with him were suddenly faced with choices they never expected to make. His music, his image, and his legacy were now fragile things that needed careful handling. The backup singer watched all of this from a distance. They were no longer part of daily work or meetings. Their role had always been to support, not to decide. Still, they could sense a shift. Conversations became quieter. Plans were made behind closed doors. Certain topics were avoided. In the days after Elvis's passing, attention turned to what would be shared with the world. His songs were more than recordings. They were pieces of him. Releasing them meant shaping how he would be remembered. The song recorded during that quiet session came up among those responsible for managing Elvis's work. It was not discussed loudly or emotionally. It was treated carefully, almost gently. The backup singer later learned that the song made people pause. It did not sound like the Elvis most people knew. It did not carry the excitement or energy fans expected. Instead, it carried reflection. It sounded like a man looking inward, not outward. That alone made it powerful. For those guarding Elvis's legacy, this created concern. They understood that once a song was released, it could never be taken back. It would become part of the story forever. The worry was not about quality. The song was well recorded. Elvis's voice was clear and strong. The concern was about meaning. The song revealed a side of Elvis that was quiet and vulnerable. It showed him not as a symbol, but as a person. There was a belief that the world was not ready to hear that version of him. The backup singer did not sit in those meetings, but they felt the outcome. The song was set aside, not destroyed, not denied, simply placed where it would not be heard. No public announcement was made. There was no explanation because there was no argument. Those involved believed they were doing what was best. They wanted to protect how Elvis was remembered. They wanted to preserve the image people loved. To them, silence felt like kindness. The backup singer struggled with this quietly. They understood the fear of changing a legacy. They knew how deeply people cared about Elvis, but they also knew the man behind the image. They had heard his voice in that room. They had felt the honesty in the song. Still, they said nothing. At that time, speaking out would have felt like stepping out of place. The backup singer did not want attention or conflict. They believed loyalty mattered more than personal feelings. Elvis had trusted the people around him. The backup singer chose to trust them too. As years passed, the decision became permanent. The song faded further into the background. New releases focused on familiar sounds. The version of Elvis the world knew stayed unchanged. The backup singer noticed how history slowly settled into a fixed shape. Stories were repeated. Certain moments were highlighted again and again. Other moments were left out. The song remained one of those missing pieces. No one asked about it openly. No one challenged its absence. For most people, it was easy not to notice what they had never heard. But for the backup singer, the silence carried weight. They remembered Elvis standing still at the microphone. They remembered the room growing quiet. They remembered how real it felt. The backup singer began to understand that the song was not hidden out of fear of the public. It was hidden out of fear of truth. Truth has a way of changing how we see things, even things we love. By keeping the song silent, those in charge believed they were honoring Elvis. They believed they were keeping his memory safe. Whether that choice was right or wrong was never discussed. Time moved forward, and the silence remained. The backup singer carried the story quietly, knowing that sometimes history is shaped not only by what is shared, but by what is withheld. The weight of keeping. Quiet. The backup singer grew older with the memory of that song still resting quietly in their mind. Life moved on in simple ways. Days became slower. The rush of touring and performing faded into the past. But some moments do not fade. They stay clear, even when everything else softens with time. The song was one of those moments. For many years, the backup singer did not question the silence. They believed it was part of respect. Elvis had been larger than life to the world, and protecting his image felt like protecting his dignity. Speaking about the song without permission felt wrong, even long after his passing. But silence has weight. As time passed, the backup singer noticed how people spoke about Elvis. They spoke of his power, his charm, his success. They spoke of the legend. Rarely did they speak of his quiet moments, his reflection, or the way his voice changed when he sang something deeply personal. The backup singer knew those moments existed. They had seen them. They had felt them in the room. At first, this did not bother them, but slowly, a question began to form. Was keeping quiet still the right thing to do? Or was it hiding something important? The backup singer was not interested in changing how people admired Elvis. They did not want to take anything away from him. If anything, they believed the truth would make him more understandable, not less. They remembered how Elvis listened carefully to music, how he treated others with kindness, and how he carried emotion in his voice without speaking about it. These were not weaknesses. They were signs of a thoughtful man. Keeping the song hidden began to feel like leaving part of Elvis behind. Still, the backup singer waited. They did not rush to speak. They understood that timing mattered. Truth spoken too early can be misunderstood. Truth spoken too late can be lost. As years turned into decades, the backup singer saw how history hardened. Stories became fixed. Certain ideas about Elvis were repeated so often that they felt complete, even though something was missing. The backup singer also noticed something else. The people who had been closest to Elvis were slowly disappearing. One by one, the voices that remembered the full picture were gone. With them went pieces of understanding that could never be replaced. This realization brought urgency. The backup singer began to feel a quiet responsibility, not to reveal secrets, but to add clarity. Not to create drama, but to explain a decision that had been misunderstood by silence. They knew that if they spoke, they would need to do it carefully, simply, honestly, without emotion meant to shock or impress. The story did not need excitement. It needed truth. The backup singer thought again about that recording session, about how Elvis sang without hesitation, about how the song felt like a reflection, not a performance. It became clear that the song had not been hidden because it was harmful. It had been hidden because it was personal. That understanding changed everything. The backup singer realized that protecting Elvis did not mean protecting only his image. It meant protecting his voice in all its forms, even the quiet ones. Silence, once a sign of loyalty, now felt incomplete. The backup singer did not want to argue with the past or criticize those who made the decision. They understood the fear that comes with responsibility. They understood the desire to preserve something beautiful. But they also believed that honesty and respect could exist together. Speaking now was not about reopening old wounds. It was about letting a small truth breathe, about allowing people to see Elvis not only as a legend, but as a man who felt deeply and expressed those feelings through music. The backup singer finally accepted that keeping quiet no longer served its purpose. The story of the song deserved to be understood, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. And with that understanding, the backup singer prepared to explain why one song had been left behind and what that silence had truly meant. Letting the song be understood. The backup singer did not speak to erase the past or challenge the choices that had been made. They spoke to complete the story. Time had softened the sharp edges of loss, and with that distance came clarity. The world no longer needed Elvis to be perfect. It needed him to be real. The song had never been dangerous. It had never been wrong. It was simply honest. It carried the sound of a man looking inward, not outward. When Elvis sang it, he was not performing for a crowd. He was expressing a feeling that had lived quietly inside him. Those who decided to set the song aside believed they were protecting Elvis. In their minds, they were guarding the memory of a man loved by millions. They feared that revealing his most reflective moment might change how people remembered him. But the backup singer had come to see it differently. True respect, they believed, meant allowing all parts of a person to exist. Strength and softness, confidence and doubt, joy and reflection. Elvis had lived all of these, and his music carried them naturally. By explaining why the song was hidden, the backup singer was not asking for its release or demanding a correction to history. They were offering understanding. They wanted people to know that the song had been treated carefully, not rejected. That it had been placed aside out of caution, not shame. The backup singer described how Elvis had trusted the music to speak when words could not. That song was one of those moments. It held feelings that Elvis never spoke about openly. That was why it mattered. They also understood that some truths arrive when people are ready to hear them. Perhaps the song had waited because the world needed time. Time to see Elvis not only as a symbol, but as a human being shaped by experience. The backup singer hoped that by sharing the reason behind the silence, the mystery would finally rest. There was no hidden scandal, no dramatic conflict, only a decision made during a moment of grief and responsibility. In the end, the song became a reminder of something simple. Legends are built on talent, but they are sustained by humanity. Elvis Presley was both. The backup singer believed that understanding the silence honored Elvis more than keeping it. Some songs are not lost. They are held back until their meaning can be understood. And sometimes, explaining why a song was hidden is enough to let it be heard in the way it was always meant to be. So, what do you make of the song Elvis Left Behind? Was its silence meant to protect his legacy, or to shield a truth no one was ready to hear? Let this story remind us that even legends have hidden depth, and sometimes truth waits patiently to be told.